My name is Stace Nichols. I hold the rank of captain, but that's really just for security clearances. Most of the people I work with just call me Stace, or Doc, or Dr. Nichols if they desire a certain formality, which I don't, but I don't object. I've actually only been with Starfleet for a few years. I attended the Naval Academy on Earth as a young man, served in the Navy for 8 years, then got the itch to see more of the solar system, so I transferred to the UEDF, spent another 22 years in that service. I'll explain what that is, just ignore it for the moment. Along the way, I was able to get my master's at Peking University, then my doctorate at the University of Connecticut. Then, when Earth rejoined the Federation a few years ago, I heard about this posting at Memory Omega, and it sounded like a historian's dream, so I transferred again. No problem. Starfleet was and is extremely interested in experienced officers, and here I am. Couldn't be happier. Did end up costing me my marriage, but you can't have everything. He was looking for an escape hatch anyway, I think. So was she. Apparently, I'm not so easy to live with. I am the senior historian with the Starfleet contingent that works here at Memory Omega, though the outpost itself is not exclusively a Starfleet facility. Civilian researchers from many Federation members and allied planets come here to study history in a way you can't do anywhere else in the galaxy. So far as we're aware, anyway. We suspect the Vankanidians might have something similar, but we'll probably never know for sure, as secretive as they are. And that's not me being prejudiced. I speak from experience. My wife, well, ex-wife, Brielle, is Vankanidian. One night, not long after we met, we were at a bar and I told her my favorite time travel joke. She didn't laugh. Which didn't offend me since I knew Vankanidians are physiologically incapable of laughter, but I asked her if she thought the joke was funny and she flat out refused to tell me. To this day, I have no idea if she liked the joke or not. Our primary mission here at Memory Omega is archiving and studying the events of what we call temporary alternate realities and timelines, or TARTs for short. TARTs result from temporal incursions, which is a fancy way of saying when the course of history is altered due to time travel. Today, time travel is officially illegal in much of the galaxy, and most time travel technology has been destroyed, but that doesn't stop some people from doing it anyway. Plus, in previous eras, time travel was a lot easier to accomplish than it is these days, and folks did it a lot and wreaked all sorts of havoc with the timeline. And Memory Omega has been here keeping track all along. For the last 900 years or so, anyway. I was speaking with a graduate student last week, and I pointed out to him that if there were changes to the timeline due to temporal incursions that originated from earlier than the mid-23rd century on the Earth calendar, there's no way we could ever know about it, because prior to then, we didn't have the capability of monitoring and permanently preserving information related to such changes. What we think of as the original or the correct timeline could merely be the timeline that was in place when we started keeping tabs. I'll never forget that grad student's reaction. He stared at me in disbelief for a moment, then he said, "That's heavy, Doc." And then we both laughed, because exploiting gravitational time dilation in the vicinity of an object with extraordinarily high mass is one possible method of time travel. Well, I shouldn't explain the joke. Okay. I can't tell you everything about how we do what we do here, nor can I share with you certain details from certain alternate timelines that have been observed through this facility over the centuries, because a lot of that is classified. Some of it is classified above my clearance level, and given what I am allowed to know, the stuff I'm not allowed to know must be absolutely nuts. Generally speaking, I can tell you that the Memory Omega facility is temporally shielded, as are our listening outposts, which have been positioned at secret locations throughout the galaxy. And as you know already, the location of this facility is also a closely guarded secret. That's why you were routed through so many different subspace transporter hubs before materializing here. For all you know, we could be at Starfleet headquarters right now. We're not, though. I'm just saying. You don't know. I will tell you this, we are in an extremely remote location for safety and security reasons. We wouldn't want the more sensitive information contained in this archive to fall into nefarious hands, and we wouldn't want to risk the archive itself being destroyed in a conflict or a natural disaster. So I can't tell you exactly where we are, but we are way out in the sticks, which is sometimes a challenge when our systems require outside maintenance, but we've learned to keep on top of things like that. Get those work orders in early. Don't wait till tomorrow to request repairs you need today. That's our motto around here. Not really, but in addition to the temporal shielding, all permanent Memory Omega personnel are injected with the DNA of a particular species of space-dwelling organism, that's as specific as I can get with you, which renders us individually able to perceive changes in the timeline that others wouldn't notice. The procedure is irreversible, which is why so many of us who come to Memory Omega on long-term assignment wind up choosing to stay here permanently. You never know when the timeline might be altered, or how, or for how long, and it's the kind of thing that's a lot easier to observe from a distance than to get caught in the middle of. Our main research tool is a network of some of the most powerful computers in the quadrant, which continuously scans the historical databases of Federation member and allied worlds, comparing the most recent scans to previous scans it has on record. When the network discovers a discrepancy indicating that a timeline shift has occurred, that discrepancy is saved to the temporally shielded database so that it can be preserved and studied. As we've been sitting here and you've heard this sound, that's an audio notification that the system has detected a timeline shift. Before Zeke and Brielle, Zeke's my husband, ex-husband, before we officially broke up, I was living here and they were back on Earth, and we logged a lot of comm time trying to make it work until eventually, well, anyway, I'd be on a call with them and there'd be a timeline shift and they'd hear the sound. It happened so often, Brielle started calling them time farts. And then sometimes Zeke would go, "Stace, was that you? Jesus, man, come on, have mercy." They love to gang up on me. There was one time the timeline shifted while we were on a call together, and Zeke's hair went blonde for a few minutes before it shifted back. He looked pretty good, I thought. As long as you're within the temporal shielding, the changes of the shift won't affect you. If you were outside a temporally shielded area when a timeline shift occurred and you hadn't undergone the DNA procedure I told you about a minute ago, you'd never know anything was different. From your vantage point in space-time, that timeline would be the timeline you've always been a part of. If you had chestnut hair before the change and blonde hair after, to you, you would have had blonde hair all along. Same thing if the timeline then reverts to its previous state. If you were in a temporally shielded area when the timeline changed, and then you passed outside the temporal shielding while that change was still in effect, you would instantaneously be integrated into the altered timeline. And again, you'd never know the difference. We've recorded some pretty interesting changes to the timeline over the centuries. I can't tell you about the most interesting ones or go into too much detail for some of the others due to security restrictions, but I do have a few favorites that I can share with you. One originated about 700 years ago, so way before my time, despite what some of the youngsters around here probably assume. A pilot for a Tasmanian commercial space cruiser who knew nothing about time travel accidentally discovered that if you fly at warp speed at just the right angle around a sufficiently massive object, like, say, a large enough star, you can slingshot yourself into a time warp. He discovered this while he was taking a ship full of passengers on a pleasure cruise to observe the iridescent ring system of a gas giant in a neighboring star system, and when they got back to their home planet, they discovered they'd gone approximately 90 million years into the past. To make matters worse, on their way through their star system, the ship nearly collided with a large asteroid, altering that asteroid's course and causing it to impact their planet in another 2 million years or so. That asteroid impact radically altered the destiny of that entire region of space. The orbits of multiple planets in that system were affected, and as a result, the Tasmalians never evolved, their civilization never existed, that pilot, his space cruiser, and all those passengers were erased from history. Over time, the gravitational effects of all those changed orbits had subtle repercussions on neighboring star systems, which influenced their evolution, including the evolution of life on one planet, and, long story short, that's why most dogs can't talk. If that's one I'm allowed to tell you. Yeah. By the way, we often get questions from the uninitiated about temporal paradoxes. For example, in the case I just told you about, you might ask how the Tasmalian space cruiser could have altered the course of that asteroid and erased themselves from existence, since, if they never existed, how could they have gone back in time to alter the course of the asteroid? There are several possible ways to resolve this contradiction, including postulating what's called a closed time loop, which in this example would mean that the Tasmalian space cruiser was always destined to travel back and prevent itself from existing. And so in this way, history wasn't so much changed as it was fulfilled. But after decades spent studying cases such as these, I think the best solution to contradictions like this is just not to worry about it. You know, shit happens. Oh, my. This is an interesting one. Apparently, okay. So that was someone with a black market time pod who went back to Earth in the year 2024 and changed the result of the American presidential election. The command crew of a Starfleet ship called the USS Massawomek was able to follow them back and restore the previous timeline. It's just as well. Flipping that election result also prevented World War III, which would have been good for them back then, but really bad for us. History's a funny thing. The more you learn about it, the less sense it makes. This feels like a good place to take a pause. Would you mind if I use the head? Thank you. Only be a minute. All right. We can carry on in just a second. Let me... So, the temporal shielding in the head on this deck is a little glitchy. A repair ticket has been submitted, but is still pending. What happened while I was in there just now is that apparently a Klingon monk stubbed her toe on a time crystal, and as a result, fashion was set back 800 years. Hopefully this particular alternate timeline is extremely temporary, because I don't think I've got the legs to pull this off. That brings up an interesting point, though. Most of the tarts we study here are relatively short-lived. The timeline is altered, and then the alteration is reversed, and the timeline returns to its former state in a few hours, maybe a few days. But that's a few hours or a few days from our perspective. Those alternate realities aren't temporary to the people living in them while they exist. When you're part of one, an alternate reality is just reality. And its history is an alternate history. It's history. And it really happened. We have a section in our database preserved from an alternate timeline that resulted from a temporal incursion which originated in the early 25th century, so almost 800 years ago. A Starfleet officer on a routine research mission to a planet which at the time was the site of a well-known time portal developed a rare form of acute onset temporal psychosis and use the time portal to go back to Earth in the mid-1970s and change history so that the first test vehicle constructed for the American Space Shuttle program was named the Snoopy. Can't say I blame him. I'm a fan of classical comic strips myself. I think I'd have wanted to name it the Marmaduke, though. Zeke never thought that one was funny, but it always made me laugh. Brielle, who the hell knows? Anyway, that seems like a minor alteration, right? Temporal agents followed that psychotic officer back and reversed the changes, so from our perspective, the alternate timeline that resulted only persisted for a few hours, but we have records of over 400 years of history from that timeline, and it is remarkable how different things were due to that one little disruption. Switzerland joined the Soviet Union. A pod of genetically engineered superintelligent whales escaped captivity and colonized the moon. A documentary won Best Picture at the Oscars. Really kooky stuff. Just goes to show that... I apologize. I'm getting a call from... Give me a moment. I need to take this. Privacy mode, audio only. Hi. No, it's fine. Only, I can't really talk now. I'm giving an interview. I'll see you when? Right. Of course. And now you're on your way here. Sorry, I've been busy. How's Earth? Sounds lovely. I wish I could have gone with you. I miss the weather there. I'm so glad. Hey, is Zeke nearby? Can he hear me? Ask him what this sounds like. Yes, actually, that time it was me. We had a real one, though, not too long ago. No, as a matter of fact, it hasn't. Oh, all right. You better go then. That would be nice. Okay. I love you too. Both of you. Have I ever been tempted to try and change history myself? Oh, Christ, no. Even if I didn't work here, I wouldn't be tempted in the slightest. Destroying all the time machines was the best thing we ever did. The risk of unintended consequences alone ought to be enough to warn anyone off. Am I the only one who's read A Sound of Thunder? But even if there wasn't the possibility of accidentally erasing reality as you knew it, I'd still be against it for philosophical reasons. We live life one moment at a time, and once that moment passes, we're on to the next one, and what's past is past. We're linear creatures, most of us. I've met a few non-linear beings, and I wish them all the best, but frankly, I never had a clue what they were talking about. Our lives are linear and brief. We're born, we live for a while, we take up the work that was left to us by previous generations, we make it our own, and we pass it down to the next generation. It's a one-way road. Or it's supposed to be. 1,200 years ago or so, a man from Earth named L.P. Hartley wrote a book that began with the words, "The past is a foreign country." It's a lovely expression, and I see what he's getting at, but I've never liked thinking of the past that way. Our archives are full of people who thought of the past that way and went to visit it and acted like bad tourists, acted like they knew everything about it and they knew how things ought to be there. And maybe one time out of a million, it works out for the best. We've had people here, civilian, Starfleet, you name it, who spent time studying the histories preserved in this facility, who convinced themselves that if at one particular turning point 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, or at last year's Halloween's party, things had gone this way instead of that way, everything today would be so much better. A few have even tried to do something about it. I've developed a sixth sense for it. I can tell when someone's considering it. They get a look. When I see that look, I tell them, you should take all that energy you're putting into figuring out how to fix the past and put it toward figuring out how to fix the present. And if that doesn't convince them, I tell them what I'm about to tell you. I'm not technically allowed to tell you this, but I've just deactivated the temporal shielding for this room. So in a few minutes, when the Klingons figure out what happened when that monk accidentally kicked that time crystal and reset the timeline to where it was before, none of you will remember this, and the only recording of this interview that retains what I'm about to say will be the copy we're keeping for our archives. So listen carefully. Or don't. It doesn't really matter. There's a species of parasites that live in temporal anomalies which exist in certain regions of the galaxy. If a person comes in contact with one of these anomalies, these parasites can attach themselves to the brain, and in certain species they cause anterograde amnesia, which means your memory from before the parasites remains intact, but you lose the ability to make new memories. The memory of experiences you have fades and disappears after a certain time, and it differs for everyone depending on the patient and the infection, sometimes a few hours, sometimes only a few minutes. I've sat through quite a few staff meetings where that condition would have been an asset to my mental health, but that's not why I'm telling you this. These parasites, when they attach to the brain, they exist simultaneously in our space-time dimension and in some other dimension where they're originally from. When they die, they disappear from our dimension entirely, not just in the present, but in the past as well. The parasites die, and the memory loss they caused in the infected person never happened. The timeline for that person and for everything and everyone they affected for however long they had those parasites resets. We've managed to conceal the existence of these parasites and their influence on the timeline from the general public. Even today, we still tend to think of history, especially our own personal history, as being etched in stone. Most people would probably be deeply upset to realize how malleable that history is. Infections by these parasites seem to be relatively rare, but they do happen, and they do sometimes affect the timeline in very significant ways. There's a case in our files from about, 600 years ago of a medical student from a non-aligned planet who was infected by these parasites when one of those anomalies passed through her star system. Her world's medicine had no idea how to remove the parasites, so she lived with this condition for the rest of her life. She lived to be 110 years old. She died. Shortly thereafter, the parasites in her brain died. In the new timeline, where she never got infected and never lost her ability to make memories, this young medical student eventually left her world, earned a position at a cutting-edge research university on Turnajax Epsilon, and went on to find the cure for Klingon chlamydia. Without her and her cure, Dragor the Lustful would have died in his 20s, never would have become emperor, never would have pushed for the peace treaty between the Klingons and the Grumpafluxians, and, well, let's just say there'd be a lot fewer Grumpafluxians around today. It's difficult to imagine, I know. That's just one person. One person's timeline being changed as a result of a natural phenomenon. No time travelers, no violations of the Temporal Prime Directive, just organisms doing what they do. How many other life forms like that are out there that we don't know about? How many times has history, our history, been changed in ways that even people like me don't notice? So much of our lives is continuously at the mercy of factors we cannot control, far more than most of us realize. Even our pasts, our memories. The only thing we really have, the only thing we can be certain of, is this moment right here. That's what our lives are, a collection of moments. That's it. What do you do with those moments? Do you spend them seeking and telling the truth? You spend them following your curiosity. You spend them on kindness. You spend them working for justice. You spend them trying to learn how to cook scrambled eggs the fancy way, where you keep moving the pan on and off the heat. I tried, but I never had the patience for it. You make the most of each moment while you're in it. Because when it's over, you'll realize that those moments there's this doctor from Earth. He gets a hold of a time machine, and he decides, to hell with the Temporal Prime Directive, I'm going to use this time machine to change history for the better. I'm going to go back and kill Adolf Hitler when he was just a baby. So he climbs in his time machine. He goes back to Austria in the late 19th century, finds baby Hitler, and he does it. He kills him. The doctor jumps back in his time machine, returns to the future, rushes into his office, all excited, runs up to another doctor, grabs that guy by the front of his uniform and says, I did it! I did it! I killed Adolf Hitler! The other doctor says, never heard of him. I guess you had to be there.